Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Permanent values part 4. Highlighting some more values which define the structure of Deen. These are the references. As I said earlier in chapter 15, some of these permanent values are discussed. Also in Islam, a challenge to religion, towards the end, under conclusion, some of these values have been discussed. And some of these values have been taken from the other literature, like the Bible Quran. And this is our contact. Some general points in relation to some values discussed today. Every child is deserving of respect and dignity by virtue of possessing choice and intent, and due to the fact that the universe owes its existence to the creation of man. And this is another important point that we should keep in mind, that it is man for whom at least the visible universe has been created. And the purpose is to try or give chance to man to create a new self and then turn this world into a better world. The creation of man is for a higher purpose of life, this world being the first stage of his existence, and after his physical death, he, that is his self, will move on to the next stage. This is something which we need to keep in mind all the time, that we have a self, and it is through self we function in the world. The Quran describes the two concepts of life which man will opt for in order to live in this world. One, that his life ends with physical death, if his view is that there is nothing within him which can advance beyond this earthly life, or two, that life at the level of his self continues onwards beyond this physical death, i.e., he has something within him which can survive this. So these two are opposing views living in this world. It is important to keep these two views in mind because most humanity who are either not interested in the Quran or haven't heard about the Quran, their life is basically lived in pursuit of only material gains, while those who have come to the Quran start looking at it from self's point of view. Man has the choice to structure his earthly life based purely on the decisions of his intellect alone, and the Quran has spelled out the kind of world which will emerge as a consequence of this choice. And this is an important aspect which we keep reflecting as we go through various presentations and also through the Quran, that the word which Quran is putting forward, which it is projecting to us, we need to understand that that word is totally different from the word which human mind creates. Or he can choose to employ his intellect within the domain of the Quran and create an entirely new world in which he will be able to live a life free from fear and grief. And this freedom from fear and grief is an important permanent value, and we'll be discussing it in some other presentation. But we should keep it in mind and also look for this fear and grief in the world in which we live. The attribute of choice and intent as part of the manifestation of the human self at a fundamental level meant that man must have maximum freedom and liberty to make decisions in his earthly life. However, if he lives according to the functioning of his intellect alone, then due to the limitations of this, he will remain trapped within the influences of his unchecked desires and emotions. Now, over here, permanent values covered in part 1 and 2. In these two slides, what I've done is I've listed all these so that whoever subsequently goes through these slides will know that there is a list of it given at the beginning of each presentation. The human self, we have gone through it. Respect for humanity or respect as a human being. The concept of Allah, ranks according to deeds. The law of requital, physical death, justice, ihsan, that is helping restore balance, the existence of the life of the hereafter, the consequence of a crime, no one carries the burden of another, not to allow injustice, no human being can be the subject of another one, obedience of the law, promote good and forbid evil, warning and admonishment. And permanent values covered in part 3 and part 4 are The system of mutual consultation never assigns state duties to incompetent people. The responsibility for risk, that is sustenance, is on the society. Means of risk, and this is regarding means of sustenance, to be under the control of the central authority. What is beyond your needs, that is making it available for others. Mankind is one Ummah. This is covered in today's presentation. Chastity, covered today. There is no compulsion in the matter of Deen, covered today. What is good for mankind remains on earth, covered today. Reward is for the work, not the capital. And let us go to the first permanent value of today's presentation. Mankind is one Ummah. The Quran has declared that since mankind consists of equal human beings, hence it needs to be one big brotherhood. And it has said, Kana nasu ummatan wahidatan. Mankind is one brotherhood or Ummah. And in another place it says, Wama kana nasu illa ummatan wahidatan fakhtalafu. Mankind was but one Ummah but differed. And this is an important point, that despite being equal, human beings still differ with each other and not realize that they are equal to each other. And if they start thinking like that, then they will come to the Quran, and that is where they will find the guidance. Despite being the same physically, they differ with each other at the cognitive level, and this aspect requires further elaboration. Because at a physical level, everyone knows that we got a same body. Of course, we have different roles under the aspect of gender, but still we are the same human beings. But it is at the thinking level that people start differing with each other. That means this dissension or dissonance which exists within our cognition, we have to deal with it effectively. The interesting part is that at a physical level, they possess the same cognitive makeup. For example, metacognitive thinking, emotions, desires, feelings, physical needs. The inclination of man towards divisiveness is mostly based on color, race, gender, language, tribal affinity, nationality, status, appearance, religion, beliefs. And of course, we can add more to it, like wealth and possession of material goods and all those, even disabilities. If people have certain disabilities, people start to go in that direction as well, that why this person has got disability, and start relating it to some kind of religious dogmas. Despite the fact all die at some point in time, they still wish to kill others through wars and conflicts. And this is a very interesting point for the students of the Quran to analyze, that why do people hasten to kill others, whereas they know that they are going to be dead themselves at some point in the future. Some think that this idea of the unity of man is a utopian concept. And we do come across this as well, that people say, oh, this unity of mankind is a dream which can never be fulfilled. And seeing the state of the world in 2024, it is an impossible task to unite human beings by removing their differences. And Quran says, no, that is not a correct view to look at mankind. It can be united, and it will be united at some point in the future. However, we have seen that even in today's world, common economic interests do unite leaders and to some extent their people. For example, we have seen that so far the EU has managed to unite on economic interests, common currency, free movement across these states. So saying that they cannot be united is wrong. Even within the limited scope of their own vested interests, human beings do unite and remove their differences. These are positive aspects. Now, elaborating it further, this permanent value. Continuing on the model of EU, we also witness that the same organization, which is united on a few basic physical aspects, is simultaneously pursuing a policy of supporting wars and conflicts. For example, Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Africa. The question which arises in the mind is that these states created the EU in order to avoid conflicts. Therefore, why do they promote these conflicts and wars elsewhere when they know they are detrimental for themselves? And this is an interesting point from while we are studying the Quran, that the same human beings who are united among themselves, why are they disuniting others? And that is where the Quran comes in and helps us to reform our thinking, to change our outlook, which should take into account the whole of mankind. This is where the Quran helps to provide an answer to this at a fundamental level. It points to the weaknesses and proclivities of the human self when it is unguided and is in a raw state. Here the question will arise that why did Allah create man with these limitations and then also provided him with choice and intent? For example, it is stated, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا, for man was created weak. So if man was created weak and Allah knows it because he has created human beings, then that means there is a purpose behind it. That is, the man has to first realize that he is weak, he's got limitations, and then try to overcome those limitations and provide strength to himself. Like the physical body which grows in strength as we follow the physical laws of Allah, similarly our self has the ability to grow in strength if it follows the laws, values related to it. And we do see this kind of strength in self even under the man-made system, where people who are more determined, more disciplined, more steadfast, they pursue their goals, and some of them do succeed. Included in this is the ability to remove differences with fellow mortals. And this is important, that all those dissonances which exist within us, we can remove them by first recognizing them and then creating a desire and a need to remove them. Analyzing this value further, seeing the word of 2024, one may wonder that how can these differences become removed when men in power themselves promote these differences? For example, through party systems, religious divisions, gender differences, differences between nation states, when the whole system of human exploitation is based on fanning the flames of these differences, and there is a constant onslaught of this by state media. Over here, I have not mentioned the differences within the families as well. For example, parents and amongst siblings and their children, they all also divided in case they do not pursue certain value system, which includes common interest. Here the Quran helps by saying that these differences are primarily due to not coming to grips with the higher purpose of life. And that is an important point, that have we selected a higher purpose of life even as students of the Quran? If we haven't, then we have a problem and we will not be able to get maximum from the Quran. And the assumption that the man's life ends with death, it instructs us to come to grips with understanding the guidance of Allah and accept Iman. And then the newly acquired life will gradually reveal to you that what is stated in the Quran is within easy grasp of the whole of mankind. And this is a difficult path, a difficult challenge for human beings, because they have to use their mind very intensively, very focused, that what are the problems which are facing this humanity and how the Quran is attracting our attention to resolve these issues. And obviously the first stage is to understand these issues. Quran says, "Sanurihim ayatina fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim hatta yatabayyana lahum annahu al-haq." Soon will we show them our signs in the outer world and within their own selves until it becomes manifest to them that this is al-haq. And this is a very reassuring verse, because Quran says that if human beings don't come to the Quran as students and put in their best to understand it, then obviously they will have to wait till humanity goes through various trial and errors, and at some point somebody will come along and say that, wait a minute, what is going on in the world? We need to change our path. And evidence for that will be available to us, because Quran tells us about both pictures. That is, what will be the state of the world when it does not follow the Quranic value system, and what will be the world transformed into when it follows the Quranic value system. Another verse provides strength. Huwallazi arsala Rasulahu bil huda wa deenil haqqi li yuzhirahu alad deene kullihi walau karihal mushrikun. Quran says that this message has been sent through the messenger. It is he who has sent his messenger with guidance and deen. That is, Quran has been sent to mankind through this messenger. Why it is sent? To proclaim it over all deens, even though the mushrikeen may detest it. So this system will come into the world at some point in time. It will get established in one piece of land, and then its effects will serve as model for others. So these are very reassuring verses, because if we have firm iman in the Quran, by using all our potentials and try to understand that this book is from Allah and what it's saying is al-haq, then gradually we will come to this conclusion that at some point in time, conditions will favor for the establishment of the system of Deen. Next is what it ought to be, mankind as one Ummah. Another difficulty which is perceived by our mind is regarding the configuration of a world which is based on the unity of mankind as one big brotherhood. How will different ideologies and beliefs be accommodated in such a world in the future? And this is another difficulty we come across, where people cannot fully comprehend that how that world will look like, how will differences disappear. And we can see that, the example of that in the world around us. This can be easily explained by taking the model of a prosperous country under man-made systems that is economically and militarily very prosperous and very powerful. For example, the USA is called the melting pot of the world, and quoting from Wikipedia, the United States is often called the melting pot because it encourages different cultures to assimilate into a single unified culture. The concept dates back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when immigrants from around the world contributed to the cultural mosaic of the nation. The term originated in the US around 1788 to describe the merging of European, Asian, and African nationalities into the new American culture. So if people accept a new outlook and for their own benefit, then they do start working together. This is primarily attributed to economic prosperity, which attracts people try and succeed in enhancing prosperities in the physical life. And initially, human beings are very much focused on their economic prosperity. Under the system of Deen, both prosperities will be available, and those wishing to also make a choice for self-development will be able to avail these opportunities, while those who only opt for the successes of the physical life will be able to do so within the permanent values, that is the laws of the Islamic State of the Quran. So we can see that people with different religious beliefs, which are quite different from other residents, and they still live quite peacefully because of the common interest of economic prosperity. Any differences among people at a cognitive level will not hinder the progress of these members of society. Just as under the man-made system, people's personal beliefs do not interfere in the affairs of the state. These will not affect under Deen too. So this will not make any difference, because sometimes people have difficulty in saying that the Quran subdivides mankind into two categories, the party of Shaitan and a party of Allah. But those are all cognitive, related to cognitive convictions. As far as the physical side is concerned, people can live together with different ideologies residing in their heads. But as long as the system is managed by those who have firm grip on the system of Deen and they are willing to follow the permanent values of the Quran. Now over here, what I've done is I've drawn a schematic from basic emotive living to higher eminence. I've tried to depict that how human beings live their life as they spend their time on the planet. At a basic level, human beings live life under the domain of their unbridled emotions. This is a conflict-ridden environment. And I put a question mark over here that when human beings are living emotively and they are not thinking rationally, even under the man-made systems, they have problems, they have conflicts, and these kind of conflicts we do witness at a family level, where divorces, separations, violence, that is domestic violence, etc. takes place. But as they become more rational, for example, rational thinking plays a role at this level where emotions operate within the domain of man-made systems. For example, within a work, business environment, this is also the stage of unbridled desires. And when people, the same people who are very emotive at home, they resort to even domestic violence and create problems. When they go for their job, they are very rational within the man-made values. And this means that human beings can make different choices. Next is the collective system of each nation is based on man-made laws, relative values. And that is why the laws change from one state to another state. And individual life is focused on material successes as defined by the system of a nation. The assumption is that life ends with death. Permanent values do not appear as a choice. Now, this is the stage up to which human beings live without the Quranic guidance. That means if they die here, as far as the life of the hereafter is concerned, they do not possess that self which qualifies for the life of the hereafter according to the Quran. They might think anything, that doesn't make any difference. But the fact is, they do not have that self to which the Quran repeatedly draws their attention to. Now, after that, here choice can make its appearance if the guidance of the Quran becomes available. So they have to make a choice at this stage that I am not happy with this kind of living, I want a different one, and seek guidance. So seeking guidance is a permanent value. The permanent values appear before us as an external choice. If we are unhappy with the man-made systems, then these values provide an alternative. If we decide to go for Iman in Allah, for example, I've just quoted one verse here, as part of the process of seeking guidance after rejecting Taghuti system, which is all man-made systems are Taghuti systems, then the Quranic guidance reveals itself to us because we make space for that, this new concept. And we gradually advance forward from individual to collective understanding. Life gets on a totally different track where the light of the Quran helps to remove darknesses. And no self-development possible under relative values up to this dotted line. And if we come to the system of Deen, then gradually we start developing ourselves, and all those darknesses which we experienced over here, but we were not very sure, under the light of the Quran, we can see them clearly in hindsight. And Deen as a system materializes here. Now let us go to the second permanent value of today's presentation, chastity. Chastity, according to the Quran, is one of the permanent values, and its breach is a grave offense. It demands its observance from men and women equally, and deems marriage to be a free contract for leading a life of companionship and mutual cooperation in which both parties stand on the same level and should be treated equally, for the Quran makes no distinction between man and woman on the ground of sex. And we have gone through this aspect previously as well, that this biological relationship is very important for procreation. Because if people keep dying and new children do not arrive in the world, then this world will become empty. Both as human beings are like each other and equal in all respects. He it is who has brought you, that is mankind, into being from one single life cell. And we should keep it in mind that women and men both possess the same self. So at cognitive level, they are precisely equal to each other. The Quran lays particular stress on chastity. It is regarded as a cardinal virtue and as such helps promote the moral and mental progress of man. Chastity is essential for moral purity and mental health. Because man and woman coming together to raise a family, they need values. And unless those values are the same as the permanent values, then the children brought up in that environment will have all those weaknesses and limitations which we see under the man-made system. What is a man to do if circumstances do not permit him to marry? The Quran advises him to guard his chastity and to abstain from gratifying his sex appetite till it is possible for him to get a suitable mate. And let those who cannot find a match keep chaste till Allah enriches them by His grace. Very important, because under the religious domain, somehow it has become a duty. And even women and men who cannot afford to marry and have absolutely no economic basis to marry because they cannot support their children, they are being married sometimes forcibly as well. And as a result, we can see a lot of poverty and deprivation, particularly in an underdeveloped world. its importance, and continuing with this permanent value of chastity. The drives of hunger and thirst are imperative and must be satisfied under any circumstances. The satisfaction of the sex drive, however, can safely be postponed for a fairly long period or even forever. Unlike the drives of hunger and thirst, the sex appetite never rouses itself. It is excitable by conscious volition. The chapter on women in Islam challenge to religion covers all these aspects in a great detail. And same goes for the last chapter in What is Islam. The most important exciting factor is the thought of sex itself, which has to be held in check. And this can be done through higher values, by setting a higher goal in life. This is why chastity is not a physiological or psychological impossibility. The Quran, by emphasizing the importance of chastity, also helps to solve the problem of population. Because parents or the potential parents who want to start a family and have a biological relationship must think through all the issues which they will face in raising their children. And particularly in the man-made system, where there are so many wrong forces, evil practices which prevail in this system, which will influence these raw minds. This ideal will benefit both the body and the human self alike, and also keep a sensible check on the growth of the population. Today, with the current state of morals, this may seem a counsel of perfection. It is so only because the pursuit of pleasure is the dominant aim. Self-indulgence has dimmed the vision of the purpose of life, which is to befit oneself for a higher plane of existence. And we have seen that how much emphasis the Quran puts on self-development, because without self-development, later part of our life in this world as well as in the next life is going to be affected. Further elaboration of this value, the Quranic advice is meant for those who are alive to the demands of this purpose. It is not just pious advice. The Quran gives it a practical shape. The first thing is to cultivate the right attitude towards sex. The way to do this is to bear in mind that the purpose of sexual activity is procreation and not mere pleasure. This is very important because we have to create our own self. We are not here to procreate. Procreate is a biological function, and we should be able to differentiate between the two. Self-creation, that is creation at the level of the self, is a far, far higher purpose of life. And once we acquire that kind of a self-development, we will feel ourselves that how important it is to develop it. While procreation is important for the continuity of the biological existence of man on the planet, man needs to create new life at the self's level to understand the purpose of human creation. And this is important for the students of the Quran to understand it, because after understanding it, then we have to share it with others, and particularly our children. Human self-development should be kept in view in whatever we do in this finite life of ours, as this will help to make correct decisions even under the domain of the man-made systems. Through Iman and Saleh deeds, we come to terms with the problems faced by wider humanity, and this puts our own conduct and character in a true perspective. By acquiring Iman in the hereafter as a permanent value, we look at every decision of ours with the consequences attached to it in our finite physical life. Connected with chastity is the decision to marry someone who has Iman. And I've quoted this verse over here. It's worth going through this verse. And particularly, we should also let our children go through it a few times before getting married. This helps to enhance our understanding about the importance of marriage as an institution. Children need to be guided in this respect when they reach the age of maturity. Now we go to the next value, no compulsion in the matter of Deen. No one can be made to accept the permanent values by force. Acceptance or rejection is the name given to the decision made by the human mind. A decision which is not made willingly and freely cannot even be called the decision of that individual. A decision is only that which is made according to one's own wish. And this is important again from the point of view of training and educating children, that they must know that they have choice and intent and how should they make their decisions. Decisions made under relative values will have different consequences than those decisions which are made under the domain of permanent values. The Quran has declared very clearly, La ikraha fi deen qad tabayyana rushdu min al-ghayy faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. We have gone through this verse before as well, but it's worth going through it again. No compulsion in Deen. Truth stands out clear from error. Whoever rejects Taghut and accepts Iman. And then it goes on to say that whoever follows this path then comes to Allah and holds on to His book. And then, of course, they will come to know that what the choice they have made is the correct one. In another verse, Quran says, وَكُلُّ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Say the truth is from your Rabb, let him who will accept Iman and let him who will reject. If somebody accepts Iman willingly by going through the Quran, by seeing the kind of a world he is experiencing and rejecting the man-made system, then a change will take place within him and he will know that he has come to the right path. And if somebody rejects it, of course, it has consequences. Whoever accepts haqq will benefit from its pleasant results. And we know haqq means something which we do for constructive results. And these are evidence-based constructive results as put forward by the Quran. And whoever rejects it and follows a different path will be confronted by its destructive effects. No kind of action will be taken against the ones who reject, and that is the kafir, solely for this reason, that why did they reject this path, i.e. leaving Islam, why have they adopted another religion? Not only is it the case that nothing will be done against them, they will be accorded personal liberty in religion, and the protection of agreements with them will be the responsibility of the Quranic system. So according to this permanent values, people have a complete choice whether they want to follow course A or course B or course C in their life, whether they want to wish to become Muslims or they do not wish to become Muslims, and they can keep changing it as many times as they want, and it will have no effect on their physical life under the, for example, the Quranic system. So, and we will come to that, this apostasy, slightly later. Now, continuing with this permanent value, in Surah Al-Hajj, the Quran states, had not Allah checked one set of people by means of another, there would surely have been pulled down monasteries, churches, synagogues, and mosques in which the name of Allah is commemorated in abundant measure. So Quran is asking Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen to take care of every one of these places of worship, even if they do not come to the Quran. And that is very important. What is happening in the world, for example, what is happening in Gaza, and all these places of worships have been destroyed, are being destroyed, it is because of non-existence of Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen and not following this permanent value. Therefore, responsibility for the protection of these places of worship of non-Muslims will belong to the Islamic State. Not only protection of their places of worship, but also their life, property, honor, dignity, chastity, protection of every possession of life. Indeed, on the basis of equality, these people will have a right to all those rights and privileges which are received according to the permanent values due to being a human being. And that is important. We should keep in mind that physically all human beings are equal. And as long as they are living this life right in this world, all their rights have to be protected which are related to their physical beings. But when an individual, having accepted Islam willingly of his own accord, becomes a member of the Muslim society, then it will be incumbent on him that he should obey the Islamic laws. Because he has willingly accepted Islam, he says that these laws are for my own benefit. These are for my own self-development. Hence, I accept them and become a Muslim. It cannot be that after becoming a citizen of the Islamic society, or in modern terminology, the Islamic State, he can then be left to his own free will to obey whichever law he wishes and break whichever law he wishes by saying that there is no compulsion in Deen. So this aspect should be kept in mind, that obedience of all those permanent values within the system of Deen becomes important for all these people who have willingly accepted Islam and the guidance of the Quran. There is no compulsion in Deen, and further elaboration of this value. Compulsion is not applicable to which religion he accepts, but when through his own free volition he becomes a member of the Islamic society, then he voluntarily makes the laws and rules of this society compulsory on himself also. So this is through choice. If he does not wish to remain within the domain of these laws and regulations, then he has permission to leave the sphere of Islam and adopt another religion. And even under the man-made system, we have seen that people, particularly immigrants, who do not somehow accept the laws of a particular state, that state at times takes away their citizenship. So this is within the human system as well, that if people do not wish to follow and obey the laws of a certain land, they are asked to leave that place. Another important aspect of this compulsion in general is that when people are made to obey some laws mechanically, they are not fully committed to the system. Whereas when they accept these laws as something for their own benefit, then less monitoring is required. For example, if children are convinced about the functioning of the law of requital, parents will have less to worry about regarding their conduct when they are away from home. So very important to educate and teach our children in these permanent values. Understanding this permanent value takes away all that fear which is created by religious practices and false fear of Allah, and we come to terms with the tremendous importance of our choice and intent. Now, link with human accountability this particular value of no compulsion in Deen. Human beings, despite possessing a physical body like animals, are distinctly different due to the possession of choice and intent, for which they are provided with a mind, which has the ability to think rationally. Each human has a strong sense of identity based on his I. And we can check that as well. Our sense of identity does not change as we age. We still feel as young as we used to be. So that is an important aspect, that our I does not age. Due to the power of making decisions, there is no inner guidance within man, i.e. the equivalent of instincts in animals. The human body functions under the physical laws which are generally known to man. But in the case of his I, which is the center of his self, these laws and values are made available externally through the Quran via the Wahy of Allah. So all these permanent values are for our I, that is for our self. When we approach and study the Quran as the book of guidance, then this aspect becomes crystal clear. An understanding of the functioning of the law of requital holds the key to coming to terms with the possession of our choice and intent. And this then leads to comprehending the presence of the human self, revolves around our sense of identity, that is I. So understanding this permanent value, no compulsion in Deen, is linked to the understanding of the law of requital and as it applies to our own self. These permanent values need to be viewed as providing the arena by operating within which we acquire a new life and meet the intended purpose of our creation as human beings. Now, over here in this slide, I have covered some comments on apostasy, because under the religious domain, that is sectarian Islam, it is put forward that those who wish to become non-Muslims, they become worthy of being killed or being executed. Under the sectarian versions of Islam, there exists a belief according to which anyone who is a Muslim, whether by birth or accepted Islam later, cannot choose to become a non-Muslim, i.e. accepting Islam is a one-way street. And this is grossly against this permanent value. In the event that someone does this and is found out, then his punishment is the death penalty. And there is a very good book which is written by Pervez, and I have given the reference of it in the first slide. Since the beliefs of each sect are at variance with each other, hence rejecting the belief of a sect is also counted as apostasy by that sect. So that means that if someone moves and leaves a sect, people of that sect can also resort to this kind of punishment. In its extreme form, any religious scholar can issue a fatwa that a certain belief of someone's is at variance with that belief which these people declare to be legitimate. Therefore, that person has become a kafir or murtad. The term used is murtad for them. All this is against the Quran. Quran has said, Innal lazina amanu, summa kafaru, summa amanu, summa kafaru, summa azdadu, kufran lam yukin lahu liyaghfira lahum wala liyahdiyahum sabila. Those who accept Iman, then do kufr, then accept Iman and resort to kufr and go on increasing in kufr, Allah will not provide any protection to them nor guide them on the way. That is, there is no death penalty in this case. Quran has very clearly said that you are free to make any choice in this world as long as you are not harming anyone. It is your thought process where you become either a mu'min or a kafir. So there is no question of killing someone because he or she possesses a different belief system. This business of declaring someone an apostate has played havoc in the Muslim world in the past, which led to the murdering of countless Muslims. And the irony is that with the issue of these fatwas, any fanatic can kill anyone against who this is issued. And this amounts to taking law in your own hand. And this is important because since the time these kind of belief systems came into the sectarian versions of Islam, the whole world went into a cognitive status quo or stagnancy. And that is still prevailing today. Because if we have accommodated false beliefs in our subconsciousness, then how are we going to make progress in the world? Our creative abilities are hampered. These become stagnant. We have seen clearly that all this is grossly against the clear injunction of the Quran and has a profound effect on the psyche of children who are brought up in such a batil environment. We can see the state of these Muslims under the state of compulsion. Now, continuing with apostasy and its ill effects. As we know, the Quran refers to the functioning of the law of requital frequently to keep reminding us to look at the effects of our thoughts and deeds in the outer world. The purpose of human creation is to use of choice and intent, for which we are provided with a rational and reasoning intellect. It means that if this rational thinking aspect becomes suspended or is disabled cognitively either by external factors or voluntarily by us, that is, for example, through religious beliefs, then it simply cannot play its role in the physical world. For creation, we need a totally free intellect, and that is why all these developments have taken place in secular minds and secular states. And we can see China, which is very secular, and how much developments are taking place in that part of the world, which questions every issue of life and then strives to find its solution. For example, the existence of physical death is an important event in our life, and we need a reasonably long physical life in order to get the benefit from this life. If beliefs are created where one lives under the fear of his life being cut short, just for thinking differently, then the cognitive potentials of freedom of thought choice are going to be hampered. Being a Muslim or becoming a Muslim is not a punishment according to the Quran. It is a step towards understanding the importance of our own life as human beings and is the beginning of a supreme journey on the path called Sirat-e-Mustaqim. So the system of Deen will be a highly fertile land where creation will take a different ascendancy or a different rise, and it will be manifested in every aspect of life. So we should keep in mind that there is no compulsion in Deen, and we have to come to terms with this fact by looking at our own inner cognitive abilities and potentials. It is the coming to terms with the true freedom of ourself and the acquiring of a new life, which when viewed within the domain of the permanent values, makes man realize the importance of his potential eminence and loftiness. So coming to terms with permanent values itself and understanding these, in fact, is the beginning of that new life. Now, next value is what is good for mankind remains on earth. Restricting the works of welfare and benevolence within the sphere of groups, parties, and nations is against the fundamental concept of the permanent values. According to the Quran, only that deed has a long-lasting benefit which is carried out for the good of the whole of mankind. The Quran has clearly declared, وَأَمَّا مَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسَ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ, while that which is for the good of mankind remains on the earth. It's worth going through the whole of verse in our own time. For this, the Quran suggests as a first step that all human beings, without differentiation of color, race, nation, or state, should cooperate in all such matters which are for the prosperity of mankind and should help in following the permanent values, and never assist each other in such matters which lead to weakness and ruin and become a cause for lawlessness among mankind. We can see that how much Quran is putting emphasis to remain conscious of every decision of ours in our life. The Quran directs, وَتَعَوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Help you one another in righteousness and piety. We know bir means where our mind expands. It starts looking at the things which it was not able to see previously without the help of the Quran. But help you not one another in crime and rancor. Fear the consequences as per the law of Allah. And we know about taqwa, that the whole Quran is about acquiring this taqwa within ourselves. And continuing with this value may give the impression as if this will happen somehow without human efforts. Not at all. We have to make an effort for this. This is not going to happen through trial and error, and it will just, human beings will bring good to their life. This permanent value will need human conviction, planning, resources, and efforts to make it possible. And there will be strong opposition on this path by those possessing unbridled intellects. But we should not worry about this, that there will be an opposition. The students of the Quran should proceed on this path, and we will see that the conditions start developing on this path gradually, whereas more people join in, the strength builds up. The earlier part of the verse is, He sends down water from the skies and the channels flow, each according to its measure, but the torrent bears away the foam that mounts up to the surface. I've not put down Arabic over here. We can have a look in any copy of the Quran. Even so, from that ore which they heat in the fire to make ornaments or utensils therewith, there is a scum likewise. So what Quran is saying is that we see that during rain, the water flows through these channels according to their capacity, and all that rubbish which is in that water, that comes to the surface, and then it gives the example of ore when this is melted, and all the impurities come to the top. Thus does Allah show forth haqq and batil, for the scum disappears like froth cast out. And as we have seen, وَأَمَّا مَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسَ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So all the efforts which are made in the light of the Quran, gradually, firstly what happens is that the change occurs within our own self, within our own thinking. We are able to differentiate between batil and haqq. And that's a very important stage. Because first we should know what were the darknesses which were occupying our own head. And then see that how our head, our mind has become emancipated, it has become enlightened. If we relate this to Wahi, that is the Quran, and understand it according to our capacity and take it forward, then we will come to terms with the reality of our existence. The interesting part is that the verse is inviting us to expand our ability to absorb more of this Wahi, and then like that pure metal, we will come to understand what is good for mankind and why it is important to work for this. So what Quran is saying is that if we come to the Quran, then we will see that all impurities and contaminations which we have in our own cognition, we'll be able to identify those, and then we'll be able to get rid of those. Now the last permanent value of today's presentation is, reward is for the work, not the capital. This is not a mechanical precept where the state should force it, but needs to be understood and accepted based on the issue of human self-development. As we have mentioned previously, each human being possesses a physical body and has a self. Both need to be employed as much as possible in order to achieve the best self-development possible in this life. So if we ignore the needs of the self, then we are essentially existing at an animalistic level, and as the body will die at death, we will have nothing to take forward. For this, the Quran has put forward two permanent values. The first verse is, Allah taziru waziratum wizra ukhra. No bearer of burdens can bear the burden of another. We have already covered this under the permanent values in one of our previous presentations. And in the next verse, Quran says, وَأَنْ لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى, that man can have nothing but what he strives for. So in the first case is related to human self, that at a thinking level, whatever our responsibilities are, we are responsible for them. And if we do not carry those out, then obviously our self will suffer. And the second one is related to our efforts through our being physical being. And of course, for this, we also need our cognitive abilities. Connected with this is verse 2015, and I included it because there is something very important over here. Inna saata atiyatun akado ukhfiha litujza kullu nafsin bima tasa. And this is what the Quran has noted in response to the messenger Musa being asked to go to Pharaoh and establish the system of Deen and work on behalf of Allah. And what Quran has said is, verily the hour is coming. Very important. Quran is saying that what the messenger Musa was told was that this revolution of thoughts was going underneath in human hearts and minds. For example, today, because of what is happening in the world, people are thinking in their hearts and minds, and we see a lot of it on social media, where they are grossly unhappy with the state of the world in which they are living. My design, that is Allah's design, is to keep it hidden. And that's a beautiful point over here, that what Quran is saying is that Allah knows the secrets of our hearts. And to respond to all these problems in the world is come to the Quran, because Quran is presenting us the solution, and then see how things develop in our favor. For every self to receive its reward by the measure of its efforts. And see, the same effort is appeared over here, which is masa'a. Over here it is mentioned. That what Quran is saying is that Allah will help you. That is, the Quran will help you to earn the best out of your own efforts. And obviously the first stage is to change our thinking, and we also use our body, our physical potentials to their maximum. The structure of the system of Deen is raised on the law of requital, in which every person participates both physically as well as intellectually. After coming to grips with the functioning of the law of requital, everyone holds his own physical body accountable in order to get the optimum from it. That means one should know that what we are capable of doing. If we are capable of doing, that is, for example, cooking, then we must cook. If we are capable of cleaning our car, we should do that. If we are capable of digging something and digging is required, then we must do it. And the issue of exploiting the work of others by doing nothing gradually finds replacement with the giving of one's best to acquire the best self-development. So body and self have to work together as a team in order to let this self develop for a higher purpose of life, to which the Quran has invited our attention in this verse. Next on this, continuing, rationally, the Quran has explained that the resources of the earth are made available free to man to go through this finite physical life. In order to benefit from these natural resources, we have to make use of our intellect and physical abilities. We get our intellect free, while the use of our physical body turns these resources into means of sustenance. The Quran here comes to our rescue and places before us the superior option of making that part of the means of sustenance available for fellow mortals which we are bestowed free from Allah, i.e., whatever we get from the land plus the free intellect. The reward for this is in the form of a system in which the needs of everyone are met and opportunities for self-development become created through the equitable distribution of these resources. And there is no accumulation of wealth and resources in the hands of a few. So from this permanent value, it becomes clear that reward should not be for the capital, as it happens under the capitalist system, where somebody acquires a lot of money and then tries to get the reward or the return on their capital without doing any work. And such people do gross harm to themselves, because there's definitely nothing for them in the hereafter. Just like a very healthy physical body in which all the organs function optimally by following the physical laws of good hygiene and health, whatever and wherever nutrients are required by each part, the brain regulates this automatically under the direction of I. I by following the permanent values through joining with others, performs these functions under the well-established system. Core members manage the system effectively within the limits defined by these values. Final comments on this permanent value. This aspect is dealt with effectively through bringing change in the human psyche. In this verse, attention is drawn towards this aspect. For example, Quran says, Yasalunaka anil khamre wal maisire kul fihima ithmun kabirun wa manafiu linnase wa ithmuhuma akbaru min nafihima. If you remember, we covered this, the next part of this verse is Yasalunaka maza yunfikun kulul af, that what is beyond your need, you should make it available under the system of Deen for others. So I quoted this first part because there is an important aspect over here as well with regard to this permanent value. They ask you concerning wine and gambling, say in them is great itham. Itham means, we will come to this slightly later. Itham means that where our own inner weaknesses become enlarged. We start relaxing and we do not become any active. We start living on the hard work of others. And some profit for man than the profit, but itham is greater than the profit. Khamr is to cover or hide something, every intoxicating substance, because it covers the human intellect. Because brain is given to our eye, to us, to utilize it, and anything which affects our brain is bad for us because we will start making bad decisions. And we can see that under the influence of intoxication, for example, alcohol, people are not in their senses. Maisar made the work or matter easy. It is in relation to the desire for obtaining easy money through gambling. And whole of the man-made system, that is the capitalist system, is based on this, that how to make quick bucks. And for example, stock exchanges and this gambling business and even the businesses which the rich countries make by exploiting the poor countries and by, for example, changing their regimes and putting leaders of their own choice who work for them. So all this is that mentality which goes against this permanent value. And itham over here, the meanings include exhaustion, sadness, loss of energy, slow tread, weakness. It also means delay or to stay behind. And we can see that because the biggest loss of the man-made system is that most of these human beings who are unguided and go and die with an unguided self have nothing in the hereafter. And just see from the Quranic perspective how big loss is that for these finite 60, 70, 80 years of life, they have nothing in the hereafter. They lost all their any claim on the life of the hereafter, and it is a tremendous loss. This thing should sink into our minds as students of the Quran, that how to explain this to others who are not attracted towards the guidance of the Quran. There are short-term benefits or pleasures associated with exploiting the hard work of others, but in the long run, these affect the individual as well as the collective character of the people. Here the Quran asks us to analyze all aspects of the man-made systems critically in the light of the Quran by taking into account the effects on the human self as well as on the physical body. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. Thank you.